afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome back to the Weather Center. Today is January 2nd, 2024. Thank you very much for joining me this afternoon. We're going to be covering all the latest information with this concerning winter storm we're looking at during the early to middle parts of next week, as well as this low-pressure system expected to move across the Gulf coastline during this weekend that could bring us some disturbed weather and maybe a marginal risk for some severe weather depending on the dynamics we have on the local scale. We're going to keep this very brief, at least I hope so, with the way I tend to talk, so I want to save a lot of the specifics for our live stream at 8 p.m. So if you have the availability, please feel free to join us, like and share this video so it can get to the appropriate parties who need this information, and subscribe to the channel if you are brand spanking new folks. We are nearing our 6,000 subscriber threshold, and I'm very excited to be kicking off the new year in style, as well as getting a lot of this prevalent info to the folks who need it, like the Gulf Coast region, the Southeast, the Mid-Atlantic, and all the way up to the Northeastern United States. Let's get started. All right, looking at our 12Z European model, honestly, it looks like the euro has trended down just a little bit. We are still seeing a pretty gratuitous shared energy region right across the Southeast and Mid-Atlantic United States, as you can see here, where the jet stream in the south, our El Nino subtropical jet, is interacting with a trough digging in over the west associated with our polar front jet. This is why I do think we might see a marginal risk of severe weather. I just don't think SPC is going to highlight it just yet because this has been very erroneous. A lot of our model platforms, to include the Euro and GFS alike, have been a little back and forth in terms of what sort of phenomena we could see out of this, outside of maybe just a rainmaker to bring at least a few inches to the Gulf Coast, as well as Florida Peninsula, which is great for our drought conditions that continue to linger for the region, but we'll have to keep a close eye out as we get closer in time. Maybe by Thursday, if not Friday, when our high-res data comes in, we'll get a little bit better of a handle as to what we could be expecting. As we continue through time, here comes our main event. This is a deep polar front jet associated trough digging in across the desert southwest, scraping through the southern tier United States. It does seem like the euro has weakened. The subtropical jet activity, or our low-latitude jet, moving across Mexico and the Gulf of Mexico, which is why it doesn't seem like it's as impressive of jet-level winds over South Texas into Louisiana and Arkansas, spreading further to the north towards the Midwest region and the Great Lakes. Originally, especially overnight last night, we were actually seeing a much larger swath of higher-level winds between about 120 to 138 knots, according to our legend on the right-hand side of this chart. You can still see, however, we are expecting a bit of a negative tilt with this. Very, very good diffluent flow out ahead of it, which is going to help to increase that severe weather threat highlighted by Storm Prediction Center. We're at a 15% moderate threat along the Gulf coastline states, particularly from East Texas through Louisiana into the Florida Panhandle, and we are looking at some adjustments going on to our snowfall. We'll get into that here in a moment. All right, so here we have our 500 millibar vorticity, Euro on the left, GFS on the right-hand side, and there is a bit of discontinuity with our timing between these two models, and I'll show you that here in a moment. But first, we're going to examine what it looks like that system in the southeast could be doing this Saturday and Sunday. Not a whole lot of vorticity associated with it, maybe just a good major shortwave trough at 500 millibars screaming through the southeast United States, moving through Louisiana, Mississippi at this current point in time. This is 18 Zulu, Sunday afternoon, January 7th. You can see the euro doesn't have a whole lot of faith in this system developing a good level of upward vertical motion, at least at that 500 millibar level, which is one of the parameters I do think SPC is examining and why we don't have this highlighted even for just a marginal risk for severe. Do I think we'll get a little thunder and lightning out of this? 100%, especially with the 850 millibar flow I'll show you here in a moment, but it also does seem like we're going to still have a good modified polar air mass entrained along the southeast quadrant of the U.S., which is kind of what we're feeling right now, as a matter of fact. This is where things get a little tricky, so as I take this through time, notice we're going to stop the clock at 0Z on Wednesday. This is the 10th, or January 10th. However, this would be live for 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time on the 9th, Tuesday night, and you can see the Euro and the GFS alike both have a closed upper low associated with the cold sector of the outlining jet at 300 millibars, but there is a clear delineation between what the Euro and the GFS are thinking, with the positioning of the low being very off. You can see it's centered here over Tennessee and Kentucky as of 0Z on January 10th, but the GFS is actually moving it along a little bit faster, albeit carrying that negative tilt, moving it into the lower Great Lakes Midwestern region by the same time, which is easily about 300 to 500 miles off, and this could play a huge role in exactly how our snowfall unravels in terms of where it would likely fall the heaviest and our total accumulation. Now we're going to take a look at our 850 millibar flow. So I'm going to fast forward right into this weekend, and you can see we have a very good low-level jet coming right out of the Caribbean Sea, out of the Bay of Campeche, and through the Gulf of Mexico, which will not only up our warm air advection or our warm conveyor on the leading edge of the frontal boundary associated with this low pressure, but it'll also help to up the shear that we could possibly see with the isolated convective activity that could be spawned as the system works its way through. So very impressive, a lot more localized than what we'll be seeing here in a couple moments. If I fast forward to our big whopper of a system, you can see a very, very robust low-level jet. And I'm talking, this is a strenuous low-level jet moving out of the Gulf of Mexico all the way up through the Canadian border up towards the James Bay area. As a matter of fact, we could see some warm air advection associated with this. This is exactly why I do think that we have a very solid threat for severe weather right along the coast, even into Florida. And I wouldn't be surprised if we see that severe coverage expand further into Georgia and the Carolinas as we go over the next 24 to 48 hours if SPC stays on the ball. Now, this might look a little different to you, okay? We're on the College of DuPage, and we're actually looking at our 700 millibar flow because we don't want to forget what's happening in the mid to upper levels in terms of our wind pattern, because this is going to directly translate down to the surface. We don't only want to focus on strong convective winds and tornadoes for the south and southeast, but I also do think this is going to be a great non-convective threat because of the fact that we're not only going to have a strong pressure and thickness gradient down at the surface to worry about, but an extreme amount of potential momentum transfer, which is a mixing of the upper level wind pattern down to the surface where we can realize some of the strong winds that are flying through overhead. And as you can see, this is a static shot. I'm not going to move the timestamp from here. I just want to give you guys a bit of a feel of what I'm anticipating. And you can see right in the southeast pocket of the U.S., we have winds at 700 millibars approaching 100 knots. And if you take that and you multiply it by about 60, 70%, depending on our instability in the low levels to keep our atmosphere uncapped, to let some of those winds work their way down via gravity and precipitation down to the surface, we're still looking easily at a 50, 60 knot wind event for some areas down at the surface. And once you add in our cold air advection, albeit very dense cold air advection, that's only going to increase our wind speeds even further. This brings us perfectly to my next topic on hand, and what we're going to be looking at is our mean sea level pressure precip, but you're also going to have your 1,000 to 500 thicknesses here, and thickness lines are an excellent tool to use to determine exactly what type of an air mass and how dense of an air mass you're going to have moving through. So this will be a great judge of just how much instability we could be looking at and just how much surface level wind acceleration we could see as that frontal system does move through. Because if you think about it in terms of density, a more dense air mass or movement of air, a more dense air mass or a denser pocket or pool of air is going to carry a bit more acceleration with it as it moves through than a less dense one. It's all simple mass and density associated with this, and that's exactly what we're going to be looking at here. And as you take this through time, take a look at just how much thickness packing we have going on over the southern plains, moving into the Gulf of Mexico region. In Air Force weather, we used to call this boxology to determine how much cold air advection we have going on. And I know it might be a little hard for you guys to see from your perspective, but we have thickness lines very, very, very tightly packed in here, which means that our temperature gradient is extreme, and our temperature is changing at a very rapid fashion, especially when you take a combination of how densely packed these isobars are. Our boxes in that boxology term are going to be very small. And as a result, the movement of air, that air mass, is going to be moving very fast, and that's also going to help to expedite exactly how much of a surface wind event we see, not only through the southern plains, but also for the rest of the southeast quadrant of the country, because we have all that air mass separate, where it's not air mass in terms of continental or maritime or tropical or not. We're talking air mass in terms of density. It's going to be moving at a very rapid rate, so that's also going to add to that momentum transfer I briefed you guys on at 700 millibars. And with that much moving cold air, you can best believe that we're also going to see an acceleration of our warm air advection, which is why you can already see on this chart along the Gulf coastline of Louisiana moving into the Florida Panhandle, we are seeing that line, that swath of thunderstorm activity firing up because that low-level jet is only going to increase in speed. Last but not least, we're going to look at two different variations of snowfall forecasts, one being the 10-to-1 ratio and the other one being the Kuchera method, actually developed by an Air Force meteorologist long ago. Both of them are fairly accurate depending on the region you're looking at. Kuchera has been proven to be a little bit more accurate, and I won't get into the terminology or the incidentals right now. We'll talk more about that tonight. But really, I'm seeing a lot of information circulating the weather sphere in terms of how much snowfall we could get, and I'm really not seeing a whole lot of support for these multiple feet of snow accumulation or several feet of snow for the Midwest, near the Great Lakes, and so on. If I take this through time and you look at both of these models, I'm actually starting to notice that the first low-pressure system moving through this weekend and into the early parts of next week could provide the northeast United States, particularly the greater New York and Pennsylvania area spanning further east into into the Manhattan, maybe parts of Maryland, Delaware, even into parts of Vermont, into New Hampshire and Maine, with a greater chance at heavier snowfall accumulation than our main event that we're looking at Tuesday through Thursday of the following week. If I track it a little bit further through time, yeah, we do see some pretty substantial totals, but in all, for whether it be 10-1 or Kuchera, we're seeing maybe over a foot and a half of snow in some localized areas, particularly over the higher terrain features of the northern Appalachian Mountains. The lower lying areas could see a half foot to a foot of snow, and that's probably going to continue to wobble around a bit since we do still have a week until this could really start to unveil itself. So we're going to dial in the snow forecast as we move further in time. Perhaps by this weekend, as we're encountering that first low pressure system here in the southeast, we can digest the model data a little bit more and kind of come to a better consensus of what it is we're truly looking at and for where. Alrighty guys, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this video segment. Thank you very much for taking some time out of your afternoon to watch this video, and I hope you like what you saw. Please again, share this information if you know anybody who could potentially be impacted by this storm. And it goes without saying, we definitely want to start laying the framework for our preparations, regardless of where you are, whether it be here in the south or the northeast, because regardless, it does seem like we're going to be facing some very freezing temperatures, the possibility of freezing rain in some very isolated instances, and you guessed it, of course, with any kind of potential tornadic activity, we want to make sure we can get our warnings early if necessary. I do expect we are going to see some widespread power outages, especially up near the Midwest and Northeast, depending on how much snow we do see, and blizzard conditions are undoubtable at this point because of how much wind we're going to have moving, not only in the mid-levels of the environment, but also down at ground level for things to be impact and for us to receive potential damage. We'll talk a little bit more about the nitty-gritty tonight at 8 p.m., guys. I hope I can see you there, but until next time, this is Weather Center Nazario, signing out.